But first I wanted to start with another way of looking at strategy. And this is from a book. You know, we talked about that Blue Ocean book and that and so I want to show some videos on that. This is from another well-regarded strategy book that's pretty popular called Play to Win, and it's written by the guy who used to be the CEO of Procter & Gamble, which is, you know, the big, you know, consumer brands. When I went to get my MBA back in the day, it was like there were three places you usually went. You went either into consulting, you know, Bain or McKinsey or the Boston Consulting Group, or you went into investment banking and you went to work for JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, or you went and became a brand manager for like P&G, Procter & Gamble. And there was a couple other big ones too. And what they're all about is creating these brands and then, you know, marketing them worldwide. And for everything from detergent to beauty products, hair coloring, you know, Pampers, diapers, all kinds of different stuff. And how do you create a brand, and then how do you market it, and what kind of, you know, they're looking for their core competencies in their distribution channels, all those kind of things. So those two guys, he wrote the book along with the dean of the Toronto Business School, the Rothman Business School or something. And he was his strategic sort of consultant while he was running P&G. And I first heard about this book because Meg Whitman said it was a very influential book to her. Do you know who she is? Yeah, she ran for governor in California as a Republican, and I heard the other day she said, you know, I used to be a Republican, now I'm a liberal Democrat. I was like, what? When did that happen?
Happens to most of us.
But I think she, yeah, and you know, because she was being teased, she just has a new business now with Jeffrey Katzenbaum, who ran Disney Pictures and was a big, you know, film guy with Spielberg and with David Geffen, and did all, you know, tons of great movies. He ran Disney's movie channel, you know, movie division for quite a while, and actually started with The Little Mermaid and really made Disney what it is today, I think, when they were sort of foundering. So those two have a new enterprise going on where they're making content for mobile, for phones. There's going to be all, they want to be sort of like the Netflix, just delivering to your phone. So pretty interesting. But she said this was a really influential book. So, and it turns out it's really good, and it's really pretty straightforward. Like we talked the other day about, you know, sort of an iterative process, right? Where you have, you know, and something like that, where, you know, it's the strategic thinking, and then the strategic planning, and then the hard part, right? We're talking implementation, and then measure and feedback, right? Where you're getting some feedback and measuring so that you can learn and course correct, see what's working, what's not. So their thinking is a little bit different, and it's called what they call a strategic cascade. But it's an iterative process like this. And what they mean by cascade, one step sort of flows from the next, right? And they start out with goals. They call it aspirations. You know, what are your aspirations? What do you want to be, you know, as a company or something? What do you want to achieve? And that's sort of like, you know, framing the ideal future that you want to get at. Whether it's, you know, you want to achieve $1 billion in sale, or market share dominance in, you know, North America, or any kind of thing, something that you want to do, and then you figure out from there. Once you know kind of what you do and you've talked about that, then the next thing is where to play. And that's all about what markets do you want to be in, you know, what customer segments do you want to target, those kind of things. And this kind of matches up with the Blue Ocean strategy too, right? Trying to find some area where there isn't a lot of competition, where you can dominate that area. There's another really great way to think about this in startup culture, where they talk about niching down, where you get a niche is just a really small, refined market segment, right? And what a lot of some of the wisdom is that you go to a place where you niche down to win. You niche down to a place where there's, you have identified such a small segment that you can actually go and dominate that market segment and win there. And then you can start to branch out, but you really start out with a customer archetype that you really understand and know, and a market and channels that you can really deliver to those people. And so this is kind of that kind of idea, right? What markets do you want to be in? Who do you want as customers? And then the next part is so it's like where and then how, right? How are you going to win? And that's more like a sports metaphor maybe, but it's all about winning, right? It's all about you're gonna achieve some sort of successful goals. And how are you going to do that? What is your, the strategic components that are gonna make you win? And then what type of capabilities, right? I'm sure spell it almost right at least. Capabilities do you have to have in order to do that, right? What kind of core competencies in your business do you need to develop? You may have core competencies. That's one of the parts of strategy. Is like, well, we want to do this. Oh, great. Do you have the people and the skills and the tool set and the resources to achieve those goals? Well, no. Well, then the goals are more of a fantasy than anything you can actually achieve. And so sometimes when you're going through these, you might be thinking about, well, what are our core competencies now? What are we really competent in? What do we do better than other organizations? And there may be some that then you think, well, we have to develop those. Either we have to go acquire them or we have to develop them because we don't have them. Or you may want to partner with someone too that has those core competencies in some way. Because it may be distribution channels or something, and then you go find a logistics company that you're going to go partner with. Even you could say with Amazon, right? One of the core competencies that they need is fulfillment, which is how the heck they have the warehouses, they package it up and all, but then they have to get it to your house, and it's that last mile is really the hard part. And so they have partnerships basically with several organizations. You could think FedEx, the post office, UPS, DHL, those type of services are partners for them in that. Even though they're a giant company, they're not vertically integrated yet into that part. Now, that's another thing I talked about the other day, and I want to make sure that we go over is integration, right? And where you are vertically. That's part of this is where do you sit, where to play is, say, in the vertical, what they call vertically, in the integration, in the vertical. You may be upstream, where you're where you maybe produce something, but then you have distribution and retail that's not owned by you. You could be downstream, where you're, the retailer, say. Or you could be vertically integrated, where you're doing all these kind of things, right? And so this has to do with, supply chains too, right? And operations. Supply chains, operations, and then, distribution or channels, whatever you want to call it. How do you get your stuff to people? And how do you make them aware of it too? So companies like, say like Samsung, you could say is relatively upstream in their phone markets, right? But arguably, there's other ones upstream of them, right? So maybe they're here, with their phones, and up here upstream might be, you could think of as Google and the Android operating system that then Samsung uses in their phones. And then the downstream would be where they sell the phones, say in Walmart or Best Buy, or through Verizon and AT&T and these others. So they've chosen to sort of play somewhere in here, right? Where a company like, and then say FedEx and UPS and those companies you're talking about, they're more downstream, right? They're actually delivering things. So they're at the and retailers like Target or Walmart you could consider as downstream. They're doing they get all of their products from other suppliers, and then they're downstream. Companies like Apple, we were talking about Apple, has decided to do the whole enchilada, and so I mean all the way up to where they get the raw materials, the mineral mines for the aluminum that is polished and put into the iPhone case, or they're making their own processors and chips. So they're not even getting their integrated circuits and their microprocessors from Intel, and some of there are, but some of them they're making themselves. So they're trying to just capture everything and control it, and then they make the iOS, the operating system, where you think of like IBM personal computers, basically was what allowed Microsoft to get so big, because Microsoft made the operating system that was in all of those computers in. So they're making the operating system, they're making all the software. It's a closed ecosystem. It's like a walled garden, right, where they have everything, including a really incredible retail network. And that is an unbelievable barrier to entry, right? And other companies like Samsung and these others, they're selling their goods through, Best Buy and Walmart, and however good those salespeople are, they're not as good as those Apple, Genius Bar folks and everybody that knows things in there. And they don't have those type of stores. Well, I think one of the most popular stores has to be the most activity generator stores, probably saving that mall in Uptown, right, is the Apple store. Have you ever gone in there? It's like you can go in there on a Tuesday morning or a Thursday afternoon, and it's filled with people. And you look, and everybody, it's different ages, it's different, it's not all just sort of geeky techno people. It's, everybody's in there, and they're looking at stuff, and and even kids. They have a little kids section with little beanbag chairs, and you see the little kids playing on the tablets, and like we said, just totally intuitive about it. So they've done this whole thing, vertically integrated. And so that's part of where to play, right? Where are you going to be in your vertical? Are you going to be upstream, downstream, or are you going to be vertically integrated? When Apple started to do those retail stores, the conventional wisdom was they're insane. They shouldn't do that. That's really a mistake. It's a lot of money into these stores, but they did such a great job. They're beautiful, and it's allowed them to sort of position themselves, because that's what a lot of it's about, is positioning in the mind of the customer, allowed them to position themselves as a luxury brand. Like, we talked about their flagship store in Paris is on the Champs-Élysées, near Louis Vuitton, these other kind of, fancy stores. There are other stores on Fifth Avenue in New York, near Tiffany. And so in our minds, Apple is a luxury brand. It's, even though we think of it as a technology company, it actually commands the kind of margins that a luxury brand can command. Like when you look at, Bottega Veneta or something like that, a wallet from Bottega Veneta costs $500, or a pair of, what are the shoes? The what? Louboutin. I was saying Louboutin, right? The Christian Louboutin, that's exactly what I was saying about Louboutin shoes. The red sole, right? Those shoes are probably the same as any $150 shoes or something, but like Manolo Blahniks or something, but they can command $1,500 because it's a Louboutin, right? And getting that kind of luxury brand signaling, Rolex or Patek Philippe, those watches, those things can cost up to $150,000, those watches. So, the Amazon, Apple has been able to command like 40% margins, like 40% of their cost falls to the bottom line as net income, where Samsung with their Android-based phones might get 5% of a margin or something, very skinny, because they're just like a commodity. It's like, oh, whatever the new phone is, yeah. But and it was even greater a few years ago, where people would camp out for the latest Apple phone when it was coming, when the latest iPhone was coming out. People had to have it, And I think right now they're going through sort of a, the phone has gotten to be pretty much of a commodity. We expect so much from it, even though it's an absolute piece of technological wizardry and it works really well and it works all the time. It doesn't break that often. It's really remarkable. But I think we've gotten sort of, used to it, inured to that level of magic. And even when they came out with the tablet, everybody thought the iPad, what a ridiculous thing. It's sort of like between, it's not a phone, it's not a computer, it's in between there. Why do we need this? I thought that, it's like, and they got really dismissed it. And now it's my go-to device. When I'm at home at night, that's what I look at everything on my tablet. And so I don't use my phone that much anymore for, searching the internet or anything. I pretty much use it as a phone or for maps and stuff like that, and for messaging, all that. But everything else I look at, I don't go to my computer and sit at the desktop. I like to lie in bed or whatever on the couch and just look at my tablet. Or to look at Netflix or something is perfect on the tablet. But so they right now they're in sort of, I think, sort of the latest product hasn't come up yet. It's like we talked about, they had the iPod, right? And that was pretty cool. And then the iPhone, and this was like 2001 or something like that for the iPod. And then the phone came out in 2007. And then the iPad came out, and that was maybe 2012, something like that, or 10. Not too far after. Let's say 12. And now all these things are kind of, they're going, and now they have the watch, but it hasn't really caught on yet as much. It's like one more device I have to have and all that. But I really think that there's a good chance that the watch is going to take off. People now are still, that hasn't consolidated. We have Fitbit and Garmin. Garmin's doing like the location stuff and the mountaineering and that type of outdoorsy folks. Fitbit's sort of the exercise crowd, and everybody wants to get their 10,000 steps in every day. But the iPhone, the iWatch can do all those things really well. Plus, can do all this medical stuff, your heartbeat, all this kind of stuff. And they've hired a whole bunch of doctors to get into digital health. And I think, we'll see, but I think that can really take off. Because I'm, right on the cusp. I don't want to buy one yet, but once there's some killer apps on there that's showing me that, I can, track my exercise and my health, and my sleeping patterns and everything else, and plus have my calendar and everything else here, it may really, turn out to be a great device. And
if they could just make them prettier.
They have to make them prettier?
Smaller.
They're kind of big, yeah, they're kind of big and chunky. But you want a display of some sort, some size, but you don't want it too big. And in a way, watches, I'm surprised, back when there's another thing, the watches, the whole watch phenomenon. Back in the 1970s, Casio, when the Casio first came out with the digital watch, so we have it, Casio. You could get them for relatively inexpensive, and I mean now you can get a digital watch for maybe $10 or something, and it tells the time, does all the kind of stuff. It tells it really accurately, and everybody thought back then it was the death knell of Swiss watchmakers. These beautiful Rolexes and crafted watches and all. Why would anybody pay $5,000 to get a beautiful waterproof watch that had all these elaborate mechanisms in it, and with so many moving parts and gears and all that kind of stuff, and so fine-tuned and little, they tend to break. You get a little bit of dirt in there or something and they don't work or whatever. That was over. That was from the past. But to this day, the Tag Heuer and the Rolexes and all these watches are still, really prestige items. Their utility has been usurped by.
It's a piece of jewelry.
It's a piece of jewelry, and it's a signifier that I'm rich. I've got a Rolex on or whatever, right? Yeah, that I've made it. It's some sort. Right. It's some sort of piece of jewelry and a signifier of. It's a luxury item. Because the utility, you can get the utility from, you got it on your phone. I'm sorry, what?
The same reason you'd buy diamond earrings.
Exactly. That's what it's become. There's no utility necessarily in the diamond earrings, but they look, they're beautiful, and but that's something too that's gone on for, I would say all of recorded history. I mean, since humans started to think in terms of elaborating on beauty or whatever, to have jewelry. You look in museum expert Mesopotamia and all these places, and there's all these beautiful, gold necklaces and diamonds and things. And now, too, you'd think that diamonds, because there's so many questionable things about diamonds, how they're mined, the whole De Beers sort of cartel around limiting how many go out, so you keep the supply limited so the demand, the prices can be up. And now there's these flawless and really good-looking, like Swarovski crystal and also cubic zirconia, which used to be sort of, it was not. Now they look really good, and they have all that internal fire and everything, and they cut really nicely, and you can get them, for a lot less expensive, and they look beautiful, and they could be set really nicely, and so getting real diamonds, maybe it will tend to go away. Maybe not. It's hard to tell sometimes what strategically what's going to erode, sort of disrupt a business out of the way, or something's going to stay on, like the watches. Who would have known?
Especially with this new millennials generation, like people that was born in the millennials. So it's going to be crazy because yesterday, on Monday, you were talking about the iPod and things like that. Now, after when they released that, it was like everybody wants one. And then they just stopped because you can do whatever you want with your phone. But now it's coming back because of the millennials.
Millennials want, yeah. Well, and there's a lot of niches or subcultures or cults that go for old school kind of things too. Yeah, like vinyl. Vinyl is records. People. Like
those watches here.
Yeah, right. Or even old video games, right? People go and play old Nintendo games or old, because there's something cool about just retro kind of stuff. Think about movie theaters. When suddenly we had VHS, right? You had cassettes. You could watch it at home. It seemed like that should be, well, then it's so convenient. You watch any movie, who wants to go to a movie theater, wait in line, go to see the stuff? And then when that technology rapidly evolved and accelerated, suddenly we had DVDs and Blu-ray, and it was better quality, and you could see these movies at home, and everybody would get these home theaters with the fancy surround sound systems, and now we have even humongous TVs that are really not that expensive. The flat screen TVs. You can get a 70-inch TV or something, not out of price. You go to Costco or even Walmart, you see all these TVs.
But nobody watches TV anymore today.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah, it's another thing. Like we have like the fidelity of the stereo system. We gave it up for the convenience of the MP3 file that we could just take 1,000 songs in our pocket, and listen to it on earbuds, and that was just good enough. Good enough surpasses the perfection, and I thought that would be the end of movie theaters. The convenience of just watching at home would do it. And now with Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these others, you can just watch on any device, either your big screen TV or your tablet or whatever, or your phone, and watch a movie, and you don't even have to go into the store and go and borrow the DVD and bring it home and put it in and all this kind of stuff. All those things should signal that movie theaters would be antiquated and just a thing of the past and a memory, like a landline phone, But it's not the case. If you go to the movie theater, the nice movie theaters here on the weekends or something, they're crowded. Sometimes they're sold out, and the ticket prices are like $15 or dollars for a seat. And now they've put in like these Luxo seats where you get the Barca Lounger that goes up and stuff like that. And some of them have where you can order a beer and sit there, or you can order food, and so they've upped the amenities and all. But the movie theaters are alive and kicking, and who would have thought that they would have stayed around after all these other technologies have come in to beat them?
I wonder if it's a lot like, I'm sure that once people started recording music and being able to distribute it, there was probably concern of people never wanting to go to hear live music.
Yeah.
And it's completely the opposite. I feel like it's driven people wanting to see live music. I think it's an experience.
Well, experiential. I think that people like to be, even for the movies, get together and it seems like an outing or something, yeah. And I think with movies too, I like to go to the movies still because I like that immersive experience of, they shut off the lights, you're there. When you're watching at home or something, there's too many distractions. You can't get lost in the story because, you pause it and you go up to the bathroom, you pause it, what's in the fridge, all that kind of stuff, pause it, take a phone call. There, you're in the theater, you've turned off your phone, you're just watching that screen, and you can kind of get lost in the story. And so that part of it too, I think, is the immersive experience of it. Now, who knows what'll happen when we go to virtual reality, where we can put on the glasses and, then maybe at home it'll be just as good. Because what are you going to do, go to the theater and sit there and put on the glasses? What's the difference? But who knows? I don't know. But speaking of that, just as an aside, a couple things. One, I want to talk about Netflix and what's happening there and their barriers to entry and their strategy. But before that, the virtual reality, maybe about 4 years ago now, Facebook bought a company called Oculus, and they spent $2 billion for it. It was like this big acquisition, right? And it was Oculus made these clumsy at the time, 3D, not 3D, virtual reality glasses, headsets. And everybody thought, oh, in another year or two, Facebook will have those, put them on, you'll be able to sort of meet with all your friends, and stuff like that, and have these virtual, meetings and everything, and it'll make the social media experience that much more immersive and real. Hasn't really happened yet. And then there's another part of virtual reality is where everything is virtual. And there's another one called AR, if you heard about AR, augmented reality, where the biggest, what the biggest thing recently was of the augmented reality, right? Like maybe a year, 2 years ago.
Are you talking about the wine bottles?
No, I was talking about I was thinking of the Pikachu game. What is that?
Oh yeah,
Pokemon. And the Pokemon game came out, Nintendo has been brilliant at doing these kind of things. Nintendo, the whole, where to play, right? The whole field of computer gaming that Nintendo was involved with, at first it started to just be a game of escalating power and speed and graphics, and so you have these games now that are incredibly realistic and immersive, like first-person shooters or Madden, NFL football, and they look unbelievable, and they have all of these different, characters that, but then what they did was they changed the whole game and came out with lo-fi kind of graphics and all, and the Wii, remember the Wii? And so the motion sensor kind of thing, which was way different than what the other people were playing at, shifted the whole field and took that over. Well, they did it again with the Pokemon game. They made this game that it's a augmented reality where you go around with your phone and you see all these people, out in the street. They look like they're tripping, going around like this. And you go and capture the Pokemon characters. And so the Pokemon characters were mapped onto regular reality. And that's augmented reality. So that was, and it just blew up so fast that it crashed their servers and all. They just couldn't even handle but that came and went. Now you don't hear it. Sometimes I see people still walking around. There are people that are still into it, but it really went from a huge, audience to just like hardcore kooky people that like that.
There's an awesome wine company that has an app where when you put your camera on their wine bottle, the image on the bottle tells you a story.
Really?
Of the wine. So it's like little characters from history, and they just will kind of tell you a fun story about their background.
That's so cool, and people are starting to use it. I had my mind blown today. My wife was looking at rugs, right? And so found this really cool rug, and the next thing she does, it was on Amazon, right? It said, show the rug in your house. Have you seen this?
I use that. Yeah.
Do you? I never saw it before. I said, buy the rug just because the thing's so cool. And what it does is it takes that rug and it puts it, in your living room or whatever, and there's your chairs and there's your couch and stuff, and there's the rug. And so you can see how the rug will fit with the color scheme. I couldn't believe it. You've used that? Yeah. Has it been around for a while? I just.
No, I probably only used it in the last 6 months, maybe.
Isn't that amazing? And how quickly, that's the kind of thing when the technology is right, we just adopted. It's like, we didn't know that we wanted that, but then once it's there, it's like, that's brilliant. And it's like one of the shortcomings of, say, Amazon or e-commerce is that you can't try stuff on. You can't go and feel the fabric, try on the clothes, make sure they fit right, all those kind of things. You can send it back. If it doesn't, they'll be really good about those kind of things. But then there's this time lag between, we want to be satisfied now. We don't want to wait 2 days for something to come, and that's been their challenge. But here is an app that even if you went into a store, you couldn't see the rug in your living room like that. Just amazing, I really thought. So that there's these AR kind of, augmented reality and virtual reality are probably going to be a new thing, but they're just trying to catch on to what are going to be the neat uses. And there's just a great use case. It's really simple and makes a lot of sense. So, looking at technology and what's going to make things happen. Does it work for anything else or just for rugs?
There's one that's for like clothing.
And you can put it on yourself or something?
But it doesn't. I haven't seen it work very well.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think about the app. I even deleted it.
How would you do it? Because you'd have to take a picture of yourself and then look at it with the stuff on it? Or?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't have it on here anymore, but and then like the spatial decorating it's really big with
Yeah, I'm sure it would work for chairs or if you're going to buy a lamp. Or I just couldn't believe it with this rug. It was like, oh my gosh! And it was just this morning, And have you heard of that, Kamala, at all? No? Yeah, really something.
Steps for home or decoration or things like that.
The amazing thing is everybody has this device in their pocket that is that can be used as a TV or information. I mean, it's just amazing. So people are trying to figure out how can we deliver stuff to mobile. That's we went through the internet and web and then to mobile, and the transition from web, to mobile, almost happened seamlessly. Like when you think about Facebook, say, Facebook was originally just a website, and you have to go on the website and do it, and they had to redo everything and make it mobile friendly, and they did it in such a way that suddenly everybody just started using, Google and Facebook on their phones. But to have web delivery to front end that is scalable, so depending on what device you're on, it'll sense and either give you the full screen and all the different informational things for a computer-sized web screen, or if you're on your little phone, a completely different set of buttons and all, because not just shrinking it down but making it actually different. And that kind of dynamics is now it's pretty easy, but back in the day it wasn't, and that happened relatively seamlessly, and we expected that, right? Suddenly you wanted to have stuff on your phone, and they were able to do that, but it was a real technological challenge to do that. So now everything is pretty much mobile based. When you think about how much time we spend on our phone relative to, it's incredible, absolutely incredible. So I was going to talk about Netflix too. Like Netflix, you think about these different companies, right? There was that battle between Beta and VHS. That was one battle, and I think Sony had Beta, and they were trying to be the standard for all the cassettes and all. But then VHS won out, and so then that whole format went away, and they lost out on that. And so then you'd have to go, you could buy the things, and then the whole idea of renting made so much sense, right? And you could go to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video and go and get your cassettes for the weekend or whatever, and then you'd have to bring them back and you rent them for a few days. It's sort of like a library, right? If you've done that, know those kind of things, yeah, they're pretty amazing. And for years, that's what we did, right? For several years, everybody would go, and you could bring them back to the little thing like a mail slot and leave them in. And if you didn't bring them back in time, you were charged an extra $1 or something. And everybody would be in there and looking at the different movies and everything. And it was amazing. Suddenly we had access to all these movies and stuff, but it was still physical, and you had to go get them. And then Netflix came along and then it went from the VHS to Blu-ray and DVDs and things like that, and they were a little bit better quality and all. But we had to go and get new hardware and new machines and all that, and they had to be printing them on new media, and make all these media, right? This inventory of all of these movies. And then Netflix started with the mailing service, right? Where they'd mail it to you and give you a mailer, and then you'd mail it back when you were done. It was still a physical item, but it was a little more convenient because you didn't have to go down to the store. And at that time, Netflix went and approached Hollywood, I think Blockbuster, to acquire them, and they dismissed it. It's just a fad. We got this dominated now. And they could have bought Netflix, and they didn't. And that's sort of like one of these things, they should have bought Netflix. And then Netflix started streaming, right? And now it's like you don't have to go anywhere. You just look at what they have, and you can download it. And Netflix has had a really great run because they were the first mover, right? There's a first mover advantage where you're able to, because you're first, you can go and dominate that field. And Netflix was really able to do that. But now what's happening was, and for the last 6 months, their stock has been really plummeting because their barriers to entry aren't really that great. They can't buy any more libraries. Everybody's realizing that their library of back movies and things like MGM or these Hollywood movies or Disney or these other ones, these catalogs don't want to sell. So what they're doing is making original content. And to keep up with the original content is really challenging. It's very expensive to do. And they don't have the money to do it. So what they've been doing is loading up on debt, borrowing money to keep up producing the content, and they just can't keep doing it. And so investors are starting to realize that their day is pretty much maybe done, and they're starting to lose the value of the company because there's all these competitors coming along. Amazon Prime for one, and Amazon has a crazy amount of money and really access to super cheap capital because everybody the investment community, people that buy stocks think that they're going to be, so great. So their valuation has gone up, and there's so much money poured in the company that they have access to a lot of money to go and develop new content. So they can spend $5 billion a year and run Netflix kind of out of the game because Netflix can't keep up with that for too long sustainably. And now Disney probably has one of the most popular catalogs, and they're announcing that they're making their own streaming service. Everybody with a kid is going to sign up for that one. Amazon kind of uses it as a lure to join Prime, which is an incredible. I think it's almost 70% of the U.S. households have a Prime membership, which is went from like $99 to $120 or something. Think about that. 70% of U.S. households have Prime, and it's $100, just for easy math, a year. So that subscription income is just huge for them. Say if there's 300 people in the United States, maybe there's 100 million households or something. So say 70 million households and $100 a year. I don't know what 70 million times 100 is, but it's a big number in the billions, right?
And then they're
7 billion?
That membership to pay for things on Amazon anyway.
Exactly. It's like that kind of subscription thing gives them a stream of money that's just incredible. And so having, spending whatever it is to make the content and then dominate that business and use that as an ancillary benefit of joining Prime is brilliant for them. And so, so now suddenly we're going to have Disney, and there's a couple of others that are coming out with their stream. Apple is talking about it'll be sort of like in the iTunes store, streaming, movie service. Makes a lot of sense for them. So suddenly Netflix is having a lot of competition come in, and that's really, you want to be able to have barriers that competition can't get into your business, and here it is that they can. It's taken a little bit of time, but not that long when you think about it. And so Netflix may be the next, thing that we remember when, Netflix was like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and stuff, right?
Well, and I think you see a lot too, especially in media. Every regular, kind of your big television stations, they all have their own streaming service too, or they've partnered with like Hulu, where you can stream their shows because
Showtime and HBO and those kind of ones you're talking
well,
about?
and NBC and ABC and everybody.
That's right.
So it's
No.
streaming.
Well, and think about that too, that, it used to be 3 networks, right? CBS, NBC, and ABC. And it would just go over the air for free, right? And you'd have your antenna on your roof, and you'd watch the show, and the shows were supported, and the network made their money from advertising. And so you'd have the big advertisers would, the beer companies and car companies and all would advertise on the shows, and that would be the revenue, and you'd put the shows together and get into people's living rooms, and that's the way it worked. And you had these kludgy ways to try to measure how many people were watching. Nielsen ratings, where people would have this little machine or something and say, or a little notebook and say, I watched, this show and that show and everything, but it really wasn't. Now you can actually see how many eyeballs are happening at that time. And not only the TV, who produce TV shows like the networks or HBO and Showtime, and they came along when everything went from over the air to cable, and suddenly you had everything was bundled and brought into the house via cable, and so you had these big cable companies that were dominating that, and they would have deals with the program, the providers, and then you had HBO and these other ones that didn't have to be regulated by by the FCC, by what was done over the air, so they could have shows that were much more sophisticated, with language and nudity and violence or whatever that the network shows couldn't compete with. And it's been a remarkable time for TV. Arguably, this is like a super duper golden age where you have all these incredible shows that are where it used to be going for the lowest common denominator and these shows that were just corny and for really dumbed down. Now you got all these incredibly smart kind of shows that with complex plots and character development, and they're not tied down to the formats that of a half hour with commercial slugs in between and all. But we pay a lot for that. Now a lot of people are snipping that cable, too, because you pay $100, $150 a month to get all this stuff, and it's it's a lot of money.
Well, and then I also, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking what happened to these cable companies and the satellite companies, and then I think about Comcast. They run our internet now.
Yeah.
And so they must have had to, at some point, shift over.
That's been their lucky star, because if it was just the TV stuff, they would probably be almost out of business now. But because the coax cable is such a fatter pipe for bandwidth than the twisted pair of copper from the phone company, the old phone wires, you can get more bandwidth, you can get higher amounts of information on your internet. That's what saved them so far. But pretty soon, it looks like the next generation of that's going to be the Googles and the Facebooks are already looking at creating giant Wi-Fi networks that'll just be free and all over large swaths of the earth. They have both of those companies have high altitude balloons and solar powered drones that can stay up for 10 years that will develop that will just deliver a Wi-Fi over hundreds of miles or a whole over half of the United States or whatever. And once we have free Wi-Fi like that, then everybody's, not only are we going to get rid of our cable company and they'll go away, but also our phone services. Suddenly everybody was just doing FaceTime, Skype, or whatever kind of things like that, WeChat and WhatsApp and all those kind of things that are done over Wi-Fi, and we won't even have cellular phones will go away. And that's been a technology that has a lot of infrastructure in it now, but that'll conceivably go away soon, because basically, companies like Google and Facebook and all are thinking about, well, we've got like Facebook has 2.2, I think it is, billion, subscribers now. YouTube, I was just hearing, has like 1.8 billion, unique monthly users now. That's almost as much as, and they look at, some unbelievable billions of videos a day. It's just incredible. And so those companies are now thinking, well, we've got, the couple of billion people that are in the developed world. How are we going to grow any bigger? So they're thinking about doing this too, so they can do all of Africa, all of India, all these kind of places where they don't have to worry about developing all the infrastructure, just beam it down and then we'll all go to that, right? Just like we went to Gmail and these other free services and use search and they collect all that data. Well, all of a sudden, we'll be happy to provide them with all of our telephone data, all of everything else that we do, because they'll have us right from the gateway right there. So that's, they're moving downstream, instead of waiting for access through our Wi-Fi, through our cable company before we can get to them, they'll get us right here, right at our device. So, and it will benefit, in a way we'll benefit, because think about that. If you didn't have your phone bill and your cable bill, if you're a cable subscriber, that could be a couple $100 a month, right? Of that cash that gets freed up. It's kind of nice.
It's got to be paid for somehow, though.
Well, we pay for it in the fact that we're allowing them to access to all of our everything about us. Our location data, our buying habits, everything. That's how we pay. Like, once again, we're not the customer, we're the product in those kind of situations. But we've already abdicated everything else. What the heck's the next? It's like being a drug addict, right? Well, what's the next? What the heck? The next step? It's incremental in a way. You ever hear that story? It's actually not true, but of the boiling frog. Supposedly it's, but if you have boiling water and you drop a frog in it, it'll immediately hop out. But if you put a frog into a pan with water at the temperature it likes, and then slowly heat it up, the frog will boil to death, because the incremental, it never knows when, to jump out. And it's that incrementalism that, little by little, we're giving away this data and stuff. So it's hard to know, but this is the kind of strategic kind of questions we have to ask, for scanning the horizon of what are the emergent technologies, what are going to be the convergences of different technologies, and how are they going to influence, and what kind of social interaction and makeup that's going to engender, and then how do we exploit that, or create that into opportunities, and what are the threats that it creates for our businesses now. There's a guy at Harvard, Clayton Christensen, he's a famous professor, and he wrote a book called The Innovators Dilemma, and it got very famous. It was back in, I think, in the early 2000s, or maybe late 1990s. And his whole premise was that many companies were being disrupted out of business because they held on to their old way of doing business and wouldn't take on the new ways. And so some upstart would come along and just disrupt them out of business, where they were perfectly set up to do it. Like I talked about Sony. Sony had the Walkman. So it had the mobile music systems already. It had bought the record company, so it had all the content. It had the pieces of the puzzle where it should have done what Steve Jobs and Apple did, where they had the iPod and then the iTunes store. Sony was perfectly positioned to do that, but they didn't make that leap into the future, because what happens is businesses are concerned about cannibalizing their existing business lines, and so they allow somebody else to disrupt them out of business. Kodak is a perfect example. Kodak dominated the film and film development business and cameras, and they were totally the business. But then, and they did the original work on digital cameras back in the 1970s. They knew that digital cameras were going to be the thing. Charge a couple devices and making cameras, and then storing things in digital memory was going to be the wave of the future. Did they do that? No. That now Kodak is like gone. It was a huge employer of like hundreds of thousands of people in upstate New York, Rochester, and that whole thing, they just got wiped away in a disruptive move, what they call creative destruction, right? The next wave comes through, like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video. Kodak is just gone. And what happened is the whole film and camera and everything just dematerialized right into our device now. So many things have dematerialized into our device. How about companies like TomTom? Do you remember TomTom? Or those? For a while, there were these dedicated mapping programs, and you'd get that and put it on your dashboard in your car, and it would tell you which way to drive and stuff. Google Maps just, now it's in your phone. Why would you buy something for $200 and put it in your, with user interfaces that were much more complex and hard to use than if you just have Google Maps, it just tells you what to do. You'd rent a car from Hertz or something, and now it comes with TomTom. It's like, how the hell do I use this thing? You know, it wouldn't work, and pushing all these buttons, and it would be stupid. You know, once you got Google Maps, it's like just follow the dot. Oh, every street is in there. You just put in where you want to go, and it's unbelievable. And when you start thinking about those things, how much more efficient we are now. There were so many more frictions and time losses and frustrations that we had to deal with, like getting lost in a town where you didn't know where to go. And it's like, oh, I took the wrong turn. Where am I now? You know, or worrying about where to bring your car back, and you know, when you're traveling, because the Hertz lot is off the airport and you don't really know where it is. But if you put that into your phone now, no problem. I haven't gotten lost in 10 years or 5 years. You know, and think about the amount of frustration.
Yeah, me too.
Do you?
Google Maps, yeah, it's okay.
It's and if I do make a wrong turn and then I see the dot's going away, I just turn around, and so I all that anger and all that stress of being lost and the lost time, and I got to be somewhere. Plus now we can just call and say I'm going to be 10 minutes late, or you text, and you can meet people. I'm here. Where are you? Oh, I'm over at the other in the other room, and you find people where it used to be really problematic. And calendars, right? Now I schedule anything. I schedule it into my phone. I put an alert maybe the day before or 2 hours before and then 1 hour before. And so those alerts come up, and I'm rarely late, and I rarely forget about an appointment. So all of those kind of things have gone away. All that stress and frustration and missed opportunities or whatever. It's pretty remarkable.
It's also exhausting.
Yeah.
It's what?
It's also exhausting.
Well, right. It comes at a price, and there's some downside, and we spend way too much time just looking at,
And being held accountable for every second of your life.
And that's true too, especially if you work, for a company and they're calling you on the weekends and when you're on vacation and all that kind of stuff. It can be really, so untethering ourselves from our devices. The what?
It's impossible.
Well, I do it a lot. I leave my phone at home. I turn it off. At night, I turn it off.
Sometimes I do that. I just
And
have my
everybody's
phone at
okay with
home.
that? Nobody would be okay with that if I did that.
Really?
Yeah, when I'm off, like I don't have to take care of the kids
Oh,
or
that's so
whatever. I
nice.
just have my phone at home, and
Yeah, that's what I do. I leave my phone at home. Plus, then they can't track
I
me.
don't
The
know.
Russians don't know where I am and stuff
someplace
too.
that I don't know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't have my phone to look it up for the directions or Google Maps. So I just go like to places that I know.
Yeah, you have to go to. You have to bring a map with you or something. Yeah, a compass. Well, I remember I had a job for a while, and they gave me a cell phone. It was back when cell phones just started, and it was one of those Motorola ones, like a Razor or something like that, flip phone. And I refused to use it, and they were like so mad at me, like we couldn't get a hold of you. Where? I was like, I'm not gonna. I just put it in my glove compartment, turned it off, and I figured, well, if I ever got a flat tire or something, I'll turn it on and call AAA or something, But other than that, I'm not going to use it. And it wasn't really until I got my iPhone, and I got it pretty early, right in 2007, in October, I think, a few months after it came out. Suddenly, I realized how valuable of a device it was. But it's also a big, these things are huge procrastinators, right? It's like you can look busy, but you're looking at Facebook or whatever kind of stuff. And they say that even having your phone on your desk, or reduces your cognitive, capabilities by like 20%. I don't know how they figure this stuff out, though, but because you're always, checking it to see anybody leave me a message, or somebody does, and you start responding to that instead of you were in deep thought on a track and suddenly you're distracted away. And so, if you want to do deep work, right? If you want to do any kind of deep, concentrated work, you've got to shut off your devices and just focus on that. They say, too, it's really good to maybe block out 2 or 3 hours at a time, because it takes a half hour or 45 minutes to get into the groove sometimes, and by then it's like, oh, I got to get it, and then you don't get anything really done. So these kind of things. There's one more part to this: capabilities. And when you think about your capabilities and you develop those and understand that you have them, or you got to go and create them or partner or whatever, there's one more part, and that's systems and measurement, right? And so the systems are the different systems that you have to support how you're going to win and your capabilities and all these kind of things. And measurement is how you're going to measure whether what you're doing is working, what's effective and what's not, the efficacy of what you're doing, right? And so this, once again, is an iterative process, right? They call it a cascade because first you define these, and then that tells you, okay, this is what we want to do. How, where are we going to do it? How are we going to win? What capabilities do we have to do that? And then how are we going to measure? But at every one of these steps, then it's iterative that way, right? You're going to start over just like this one. But also, the systems might inform the capabilities, or the capabilities or the limits of them might inform how you're going to win, right? And how you're going to win is going to inform where you're going to play. So there's all these sort of ways that these are iterative and respond to each other, right? As you go through and make your strategies. But this is a very simple way to think about it, right? You think about, okay, what do we really want to do? What are our aspirational, activities? What are our goals? What would the ideal outcome look like? And then, okay, where do we want to be doing that with, what markets, what customers, what channels are we going to use to distribute our stuff? What marketing, areas we're going to use? And then how are we going to win? How are we going to actually, do this? And then what kind of capabilities do we have, and how are we going to measure if we're doing it right and what's wrong? So here the measurement are, like we talked about, KPIs, key performance indicators, and there's a number of other ones. But John Doerr, who's a famous venture capitalist, just wrote a book about measurement using KPIs. And then Peter Drucker said the famous what gets measured gets managed. So measurement systems are really, really key. But this whole idea about strategy too. Strategy is a relatively new field. In the 1950s, it really started to evolve a little bit. But before that, it was just considered kind of part of management. It wasn't its own discipline. Strategic thinking and strategic planning, and a department of strategy and all. It was just basically thought of as part of management. But now we can see that the two kind of complement each other, certainly are interactive, but the strategy is really different. Management is more the tactics and how you're going to do stuff. So management comes in certainly here in the capabilities and how you're going to win. Up here is more the strategic kind of stuff, the visionary kind of parts to it and all. So strategy is relatively new as a discipline. Maybe 50 years old or so, really, when we started really thinking about this. There was something else I was going to say about that, but no, I forgot what it was. So you can see it in every company that's working, and how companies evolve, and how all these cautionary tales about companies that become irrelevant or marginalized because they didn't keep up with the times and change what they were doing fast enough, and all these other emerging companies that come up and just take away all these markets. And now that we have these incredible tools that we can leverage as far as mobile and cloud computing and digital marketing channels and growth hacking and there's all these ways to create businesses that don't take a lot of money and time to build the infrastructure that it used to. We can ride on all this infrastructure, right? All of these platform companies that came out in the last maybe 5 years really sort of were a function of mobile, right? Can you think of any? When I say platform companies, I mean like the generic term is like matching engines, right? Can you think of any? How about Uber and Lyft? That kind of thing, right? Airbnb. These companies that, and those companies are virtual. They don't own, Uber doesn't own all the cars or the drivers aren't all employees. Airbnb doesn't own all the hotel rooms. How can a hotel chain compete with Airbnb Where Airbnb is just like matching somebody who wants a room with somebody who has a room, and then matching them together and taking a little cut of that. Same thing with Uber. You know, somebody who has a car. It's capacity matched with a need, right? In all these kind of cases. And those matching platform companies, they couldn't exist without mobile, right? If we didn't have our phones where we could have the app and say, I need a ride from, you know, here to Albuquerque Airport, who wants to bid on giving me that ride? Before that, those companies couldn't exist because the platform wasn't there for them to reside on. And now that we have, you know, mobile phones and apps. Yes. And the whole idea of apps, I mean, that's another thing that was just incredible, that third parties could develop the different types of you know, applications, and then people could just vote on whether or not they were usable or served a need, which is just brilliant, just brilliant. And then you could have, you know, 20 apps on your phone or something, download them for not much money, and then your phone becomes, you know, this device becomes this sort of flexible thing that can do all these different applications, and everybody can vote on, that's a good idea, that one's not such a good idea. And it's another, the marketplace sort of determines what's a good idea and not. So there's lots of these companies that can be made very, very quickly. You know, think about Marriott hotels or Hyatt hotels or whatever, where they took 50 years or something to build the hotels, get them in all these locations, all this stuff. And then something like Airbnb comes along, and suddenly you can rent a yurt in Mongolia, outer Mongolia, you know, and there's no infrastructure. They don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. And they can have these huge valuations and not have to compete with all this bricks and mortar infrastructure that these other companies have developed. It's quite remarkable. They're still using bricks and mortar infrastructure, but they're just not. eBay is another great example of a matching engine, right? It's just like people have, and think about that. Think about all of the wealth and value that's been latent in everybody's closet and garage that suddenly got unleashed because eBay made it possible for people to bid on that kind of stuff and sell the Nordic track that's been gathering dust in the garage, or the whatever, you know, kind of things that you thought you wanted, but then realized you don't really use, and then maybe somebody else wants it and uses it. And so it actually unleashed all this value, and people could get it relatively inexpensive because it's being sold used, but it's in good shape. And it was a matching engine again, right? Just matching, you know, somebody who has something with somebody who wants something. So we've been able to clear out our closets and our garages, and, you know, pare down what we have that we know is of value, but we're not going to use, that we used to just store, right? People still do that, right? The storage bin business is quite lucrative. There's a lot of people that have a whole bunch of stuff that they don't use and put it into a storage bin and just pay $30 a month forever, just so they don't have to look at it anymore. But they don't want to part with it, you know. Yeah. But yeah, so all of these kind of matching engine applications require the mobile or a digital platform to operate on, and we'll be seeing more of those kind of things, and those things are going to change too. Like when, you know, Uber's basically looking at, you know, their end game is not to have a whole bunch of drivers with their cars, but to own a fleet of autonomous vehicles that just drive around and don't, you know, get rid of the middle person. So those little jobs are going to go. You know, now we're in this. People have the gig economy, right, where you could be renting out your extra bedroom with Airbnb and driving for Uber, selling your old, you know, stuff on eBay, and you could make a living that way. You know, you could pretty much make a living that way. Sophia Amoroso, you ever hear of her? No, yeah. She has a company called Nasty Girl. She started out selling used clothes on eBay. She had an eBay shop, and she sold used clothes and stuff, and she built that into a $1 billion empire of you know, apparel and all other kinds of stuff, and really remarkable.
There's a really good show on Netflix
about her and stuff.
Yeah, well, it's the same sort of story. It's called Girl Boss.
Girl Boss was her.
That's right.
You've seen that? Yeah.
I saw it.
Girl Boss was the book that she wrote. Yeah, and is it like the rise and fall and stuff like that? Because you know, she didn't last. But is it a good show?
It is. It's okay. Yeah.
It's on
It's fine.
HBO.
If you're a younger woman, I think it's probably
Yeah.
It's good, just sort of aspirational about her rise and fall, or just like
Yeah, I mean, she's not super likable.
No.
No.
She's kind of annoying, actually.
who play? Is it really her? Or is it a
It's
biopic with
yeah.
an actress that plays her and stuff?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's kind of goes through the story of her choosing to sell things on eBay and being able to find really, really high-end items that she can sell for a lot of money in.
That was her skill set, yeah.
The shops and pay very little for them.
Amazing, yeah, and she made that work. Well, and that's interesting that she's not that likable, because how does she feel about how she's being portrayed in her story? You know, like, oh, I'm a jerk. You know,
She's kind of
But she
trying to
is.
get out of being
That's right.
a responsible person, I think, is part of what it is. And then she found success through
part of what she's trying, that she didn't want to do the traditional,
yeah.
job or something like that. So that, and then she got really super successful. I think that's a part. I mean, that I think is one of the skill sets that that entrepreneurs have. That some of them are successful, some of them are not. But it really have to be people that just chafe at the traditional job, and they just can't do the 9 to 5 and just don't want to do it. So they have to figure out some sort of creative way around that. And then some of them do really well, and some of them maybe not.
Yeah.
But she's one that did. But then she got kicked out of her, business and stuff like that, right? And I don't know the end story, but I bought the book, but then I never read it. But yeah, I could see how it would appeal to to women. Oh, that's an interesting kind of story. How many? Is it like one season and 12 episodes or something, or?
Is that, I haven't watched the whole thing.
2, and they did Netflix just canceled it.
It's on Netflix?
Yeah.
Oh. I have to see it soon before Netflix goes away or something.
I hope they're not going away. They took over our studios here.
Well, that's the thing, they just can't, and it's like, great, Netflix is coming, and you know what? Netflix is like on they may do it and it may take 5 years or something, and they may figure out a way to reinvent themselves and make themselves relevant again. It just seems like a lot of competition is coming on. The stock price has been reflecting a real downturn over the last 6 months, and usually that type of wisdom of crowds is pretentious that things are clouds.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking, because Netflix is like it's a huge thing. Like Disney, it's kind of more just for
specific segment.
Yeah, and Netflix, no, it's like for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like my grandma, she likes Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
She can watch whatever she wants.
Their original content is good,
Yeah,
as long as they
and
can keep up.
yeah, the original things are so good. They're really.
What do you like? What original shows?
Now I'm just watching those romantic movies.
Oh, yeah, they have all these rom-coms
Yeah.
on now.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
That they actually made?
Mhm.
The one that
Really shifting into, I think probably in the next few years they're going to be completely Netflix content, which is part of why they're
That's
buying.
right.
That's what they have to be. But can they keep up? Are they going to? The problem is that, and maybe the subscription revenues, are the subscription revenues going to be enough to compete, to make enough content to keep them dominant? That's going to be the key. And maybe they can do it. One movie that they're going to have out, I think it comes out Friday, and it's many critics have said it's the best movie of the year, called Roma. Have you heard of that? Roma? It's a black and white movie about, I think it's in Mexico, and it's the director. He did another brilliant movie. He's really, really good. I can't think of his name now, but it's supposed to be a really great art piece. So there's something that I watch. I just watched the Coen Brothers one. Did you see the Legend of Buster?
Oh yes.
Did you watch that? Is that on Netflix, or is it on? I get Amazon Prime and Netflix mixed up.
Yeah.
It was on Amazon?
Netflix.
On Netflix, yeah. But it's really good. Those like 6 different vignettes, and I really like the Coen Brothers, and they have a number of Coen Brothers films on there. But a lot of the stuff, I look through it, I can't find much that I want to watch. I just can't find anything that I.
They really have a corner on the comedy market.
And superheroes too.
Like the stand-up kind of stuff?
Yeah.
What was the other thing you just said?
Superheroes like comics.
Oh, and superheroes, yeah.
And
But
they are really good. There's gonna be a new show now. It's called, in English, let me think. It's about like the superheroes, but wasn't a cartoon when I was a kid, and the Netflix just bought it, this story, and they're gonna make it.
Oh.
Show.
well, those things have really been popular. The Marvel and
Yeah.
Marvel superhero movies and stuff.
Only
I see.
time will tell.
Time will tell. But when you're running a company like that and you're thinking strategy, or if you're thinking about investing in a company like that, you got to think about those kind of things. Are they going to be around? How are they? Do they have good management? What are the technologies that are going to come up? And what are the barriers to entry? And if everybody can start doing this and they start piling on, then the market gets diffuse, and then it might not be enough to be a pure play company like that. Like Amazon, their streaming video service is they're not a pure play video streaming service. They're not a pure play e-commerce service. They're both, and then they have Amazon Web Services, which is the whole infrastructure of the internet and all the cloud computing. So they have all these different business lines, where Netflix is pretty much just doing that one thing. So they may have to figure out other things to do to stay relevant. And maybe it's virtual reality. Who knows what could come along? Or maybe it's the graveyard of,
They're the next blockbuster.
the next blockbuster, yeah. And we'll see tumbleweeds going by the studios down there. Or there could be billions of people coming,
Like, pretty nice.
go buy real estate in Los Lunas, and there's going to be building houses. And well, I don't know if you remember. Have you been here quite a while? Or if you remember Eclipse Airlines,
Yeah.
and what happened with them?
Yeah. I mean, it's just and
They went away.
space is just being rented out now.
Yeah. This guy, he was one of the early Microsoft employees, and a very smart guy. Came down. He was going to make these small private jets that had great range, and they were going to be sell for under $1 million. And it seemed great. And he came hired all these people, raised all this money, did all this stuff. The city gave him all kinds of money to go and do it out here. It seemed like a great company. Then the power plant, the engine that they were going to use for these jets, didn't come to fruition. They had a partner making those. They couldn't make it for what they thought they could. And suddenly they were left with this compromised product that had a really low range, so it couldn't go too far. It cost twice as much as they thought it was going to, and then it just wouldn't work. And so these kind of things where we bid for these companies to come here, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Well, and I think Intel too. After a handful of years.
Well, Intel is another. Intel was a beautiful thing for Rio Rancho and for Albuquerque, essentially, and all these they kept building bigger and bigger fabs and going up. And then what happened with Intel? And Intel started marketing themselves. I mean, they were doing their strategy. They wanted to make sure that they had a high profile, so they started marketing themselves as on computers as Intel Inside, right? You'd have these marks, and they thought their vision of the future was laptops were going to keep going and desktop computers were going to be the future. They missed the mobile market. Qualcomm ate their lunch. They didn't realize that things were going to go mobile. And when they went mobile, Intel didn't have the chips. And so they fell by the wayside. Now they're making chips for Apple and they're trying to get back in, but they're just not the company they once were. And this factory out here is now what they call a legacy factory. They're not building a new fab to keep up with their latest generation. They're just basically building the ones from their past ones. And then this is just going to wind down, and all those people are going to leave. And when you think of the ripple effect of that kind of business, the people that work at Intel, then they go to restaurants and then they buy cars, and all that money cycles through the economy. The economic analysis is usually like this: about 8 times they multiply the money that it cycles through the economy. So the impact is like 8 times whatever the payroll is, kind of thing. So it's huge. And so losing that was the only big company we had here. So we've always been trying to, what's the next big, hit that we can do? It might be Netflix. We got Facebook, and they made a big server farm, down in Los Lunas there. But it only employs like 20 people, and they all are, super duper, computer whiz folks. It's not a big employer. So that's one of the problems too. It might be a great, company and all, but if it's not employing a lot of people, is the impact really that good? Where Intel was a really, super one, brought in a lot of people that had high quality jobs. The whole thing about bidding for cities, bidding for the Amazon HQ2, gave up all kinds of, tax breaks and luring them, and then they decided to go to.
Information about their city.
But really, they couldn't go anywhere other than like New York makes a lot of sense. There are really only a few places. They could go to Silicon Valley. They needed the type of workforce that would be at such a level that they couldn't go to a place like, a lot of the cities that bid, because then they'd have to try to attract everybody to move there, and it just wouldn't happen. So New York made a lot of sense for them. And then Washington, they split it between Washington, because I think they need a presence there just for lobbying and for, government kind of schmoozing to keep the government off their back and, keep the regulators from, encroaching in their business too much. I think that's their strategy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see what's next. What do you think? Are you looking forward to anything coming up, or autonomous cars?
Yeah, my husband is he's on autonomous cars. He just won't.
Is he?
He won't stop with them.
He's not talking about?
We bought cars this year, and he's like, "These are the last cars we're going to buy that we actually drive ourselves." And just in this.
That's what a lot of people are saying, and well, even like you look at the Tesla, their autopilot is getting pretty good, and there's services now in some cities. Phoenix has it where they have autonomous vehicles driving around.
The big thing with it is that we're going to need the infrastructure, we're going to need the Wi-Fi, we're going to need the data and the space for that data to be able to run them. And I think it'll be expensive for governments, local governments, to kind of figure it out if the companies aren't covering it. It'll be interesting to see all of the moving pieces moving forward with it.
Well, yeah, and like the Google has a autonomous car, Apple has an autonomous car. They all have these Waymo, and autonomous trucks. The 18-wheelers are looking really amazing too, where they can make these convoys, where they just all go together, make these
Isn't that called a train?
a train on the road. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Just like the old movie Convoy, and so. But those kind of things, then you start thinking about the jobs it's going to place. It may not be the last car even that you drive yourself. It may be the last car that you own.
That's true.
Because we've been going in many things from ownership models to use models, right? When you think about music, right? We used to buy records, buy CDs, have our library, that kind of stuff. And now what do? We stream it. We just have access models. And we know that you can, find any song on YouTube. Why would you go out and buy the CD if you could just listen to it whenever you want by just typing into YouTube the name of the song? It comes up, you listen to it. Or other streaming services like Pandora or, SoundCloud or all these other ones. Same thing with videos, right? We used to buy all our movies and you'd have your rack of VHS tapes or whatever, and now we just do Netflix or something, and we feel comfortable that we don't have to have that in our house and own it. It's not an ownership model, it's an access model. We just go and access whatever movie we want to watch, whatever rom-com, and it's super convenient that way. Books, the same thing, right? Instead of having a big library of old books, you can just have them downloaded, or if you have Amazon Prime, you have access to every ebook that's on Kindle, and you can read them on any device you have, and you don't have to worry about owning those books. And you can highlight stuff and everything, and keep all the those kind of things. So the same thing with cars. Once they're autonomous cars, we may go. They've done lots of modeling of this now, and it'll be like Uber or something, where you just say, "Okay, time to take me home." And the car will pull up, and it'll pull up in 30 seconds. It's not like you have to wait 10 minutes or something. It'll pull up, take you to your destination, and then it'll drive away and then go do the same for someone else, right? So we'll have all of these cars doing that. Accidents will go way, way down because these cars will be much more alert and smarter than us. And we'll be just, driving along, and we won't care if there's traffic because we can be working in the back or whatever. And,
When you think about the kind
Well, because they're probably going to go to electric cars too, along with the autonomous thing. Yeah.
But then you also think about the fact that the majority of our organ donation is by people who have died in car accidents. So what will happen to
With that, yeah.
that situation?
Well,
There's
yeah, exactly. We won't need that as much.
yeah.
Well, and we'll be able to soon grow organs too and stuff. So that won't be that different. You know, that won't be the same kind of thing. And that's happening alone. We're doing a lot of that now. You're making the lattice works, understanding how to grow proteins around lattices and grow organs. They're doing it with less sophisticated organs like esophaguses. They put them in, and even livers and stuff. I mean, we're getting pretty good at that. And making meat that's grown in labs, right? That's starting to happen. So we won't have the ethical problems of slaughtering and concentrating all these animals like pigs and cows into these, trying to fatten them up and then slaughter them. We'll just grow our meat, and there won't be that ethical kind of thing about being a vegetarian, because we'll just grow, a filet mignon, or we'll grow a veal steak or something. Sounds pretty gross, huh?
Yeah.
No, that's what's happening though. And so all of these things are, it's just the genomics and proteomics and biosciences are another realm that are just remarkable. But think about this. There's been work done with, if it's going to be autonomous cars, less accidents, more productivity, because the time driving will be more productive time, and less traffic jams, and you'll be able to go around. And suddenly we won't have, right now, there's about 300 million cars in the United States, and we have 5 times as many parking spaces as we have cars. So we have about 1.5 million, 1.5 billion or something parking spaces, right? Just a ton of parking spaces. We've paved and have parking is about the size of Connecticut, bigger than Connecticut now, all the parking in the United States. So suddenly, if these cars are just looping around and doing all this kind of stuff, our cars are so inefficient, right? We really use our cars maybe 5% if we're lucky of the time. Right now, we're not using our cars. They're sitting out there waiting for us, right? So that's really a very underutilized asset. And we have so many of them because everybody has to have their own. We'd have a lot fewer cars, and we wouldn't have to own them. And all of that space that's now used for parking could be usable space, turned into parks.
I can't think about this happen like in my country. That's a thing that I can't see like this happen there.
You can't think.
No, because
People wouldn't give up their cars?
no. In Brazil, no.
I think you'd be surprised. We may all be surprised. Maybe not, but
That's the point. In Brazil, especially in São Paulo, we use cars, but it's not like the public transportation. We don't use like a lot of our cars because the gas is so expensive, the traffic is
so you already use public transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In São Paulo, we just use public transportation like for everything.
So this would be just another level of more convenient public transportation. That's what it's going to be, really. We'll have to see. But this stuff is coming very, very quickly. It's really remarkable. And like you said, those traumas, we didn't have those traumas 150 years ago. There weren't all that blunt force, where people, all their organs disintegrated because they were going 60 miles an hour and sudden stop. People weren't going that fast, and so now there's been lots of accidents where people, need organs and stuff because we're damaged so much in a bad car accident. But that didn't happen before, and it'll probably happen a lot less in the future, and so that'll, but we'll have to see. And can it happen in time to, if we go to electric vehicles, and then how's the electricity being produced? If it's being produced by coal-generated plants or something, then it's still, the carbon emissions are just upstreamed. We're seeing clean down here, but that's still a problem. But I think that we're going to do more, probably solar and hydro and all that kind of stuff. But so your husband's very into that and thinking about that all the time?
He just will not stop talking about it. I'm like,
Is he all about those kind of futuristic kind of stuff?
no, not really.
Just this?
Yeah, it's just really quiet.
It's captivated his imagination in some way. And so he's not, a lot of people are, whenever I talk about this, they really resist the idea. I like to drive. I'd never give up driving, and but he's not resisting that in that way. Huh?
That's crazy because you guys have so many cars, like my host family. We go like just me and my host parents drive. We're driving, but they got like 6 cars, and I just don't get it. Why? Like the car that I'm driving, I have 3 kids, and the space is like for 8.
Yeah.
There's like 8 spots, and I have my own car. And there's the kid's car, and my host mom's car, my host dad car, and my host dad guy got 2 cars, like 2 more cars,
and everybody just drives by themselves, and it's remarkable. And when you think about just seeing everybody driving around, and everybody is purposeful, everybody's going somewhere, and it's all these point-to-point kind of things. It's really remarkable, and how these towns out, especially in the West, have been just. If you go to Europe or you go even to the, Boston and New York, those towns weren't designed for cars, and especially in Europe and stuff. I'm sure, in Brazil and out here, I mean, like Albuquerque is just totally. If you see somebody walking or you walk around, you feel like alien.
But here, you guys walk more than in St. Louis, because in St. Louis, nobody walks.
Nobody walks.
On the outside.
Well, it's probably, it rains and it snows and all that kind of, at least here the weather's kind of nice, but yeah, a lot of people don't walk because, and it's so crazy when you see people, drive to the gym to get on a treadmill, where you could just walk around, instead.
We have, for a long time we were going to a gym that's just 3 blocks from our house, and I refused to drive there. I'm like, this is outrageous. It's going to take 5 minutes to walk. Like, I'm going there to get on the elliptical anyway.
Right.
It's like, it's ridiculous.
But lots of it, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny that we have these ideas about, and so,
It's because here, it's so crazy, because if you look it up on Google Maps or something like that, it's going to take like 8 minutes by car. If you're going to walk, it's going to take an hour.
Right.
It's so crazy.
And we're all about speed. And when you drive around here, it's all, strip malls, and everything is just parking lots, and it's made for, and 6 lanes of cars, and it's made for driving. It's not made for walking.
Yeah, that's crazy, because if you go to São Paulo, these streets, they're really, really small. The cars there, they're a lot bigger than here. So it's kind of so crazy. The first time that I drove here was unbelievable. It was completely different, because everything is so big, and the parking is so big, and everything, there's no traffic here. It's so perfect.
Right, it is. It's convenient, and even companies like Ford and our big, and GM and all, they're moving away from making sedans, and they're only going to make big trucks and big SUVs, because that's what people want.
Everything is automatic, because in Brazil we don't have a lot of cars automatic. It's just
the standard shifting.
Yeah, I learned drive in one like that.
The car I have now is the first automatic car I've ever owned.
Oh.
Still kind of throws me off.
Really?
So you're going to go right from automatic to autonomous here.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm going to just be really quick with that.
But I can see, everybody's like worried. Well, what if, how can, I'm not going to let some robot drive my car. I'm afraid it'll crash. But we all get on planes, and those pilots up there aren't flying that plane, They're they set it and it just goes on autopilot, and we're comfortable with that. It's the same kind of thing, but we, in our minds, it's no, I need control of that car,
Well, I wonder if it'll be even, it'll just happen without us noticing. So my car has a lot of the automatic, or
that's just going to have incremental.
You put it on autopilot while you're driving.
Yeah.
And my car slows itself down and speeds up, depending on where cars are around it. And basically when I'm on the interstate, I'm just steering.
Right, exactly. And the Tesla is I think the highest level of that autopilot, and it'll change lanes and go around cars and do all kinds of, and it'll slow down if there's a car in front of you, all this kind of stuff. The what?
People are okay with it.
Yeah, they're okay with it.
Just slowly be more and more.
Just like the boiling frog, it'll be incremental. It's not going to be one day suddenly there's nobody in your car, maybe for some people, but it'll be for a while it's just on the highways, then it's just around town, and then it's just, and before you know it, it's complete, yeah. Because even the Tesla now has where you can, it's called like concierge or something like that, where you hop out of your car and it goes and finds the parking space. And then you call it and it drives and picks you up. Unbelievable, right? And there's other ones that do the, you set it up and it does the parallel parking kind of thing, and that's all automatic. So that, yeah, there's these sort of incremental phases of it that get us used to doing that.
It'll be fun. And then
It'll be
it's
fun.
To work even more. Because we won't be.
And then we can work all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.